Another mystery buried deep in the hills of eastern Washington. KOMO4's Denise Whitaker heads east in search of the hole.
For 30 years, they told us it was just a ghost story, a bottomless pit whispered about on late-night radio. They said it didn't exist. They said it was impossible. But now, for the first time in history, advanced AI has gone where humans couldn't. And it didn't just find a hole. It found something looking back. What you are about to hear isn't science fiction. It is the data they tried to wipe. Is Mel's Hole a geological freak, or is it the lid on something ancient, alive, and waking up? A legend buried in silence. For decades, Mel's Hole was little more than a ghost story whispered in late-night corners of the radio and fringe internet forums. A man named Mel Waters claimed that on his rural Washington property there was a hole that didn't just seem deep, it seemed endless. No bottom, no echo, no explanation. The kind of thing that should have been dismissed instantly by science, and yet somehow refused to go away. It started in 1997 with a phone call to the Coast to Coast AM radio show, a place where the bizarre was given a platform, but also where strange claims were met with serious questioning. Mel's voice wasn't sensational. He sounded more like a neighbor describing a pothole in his driveway than a man announcing one of the great mysteries of the modern age. He said he'd lowered a fishing line weighted with lead into the hole, spool after spool, until he had gone more than 15 miles down without hitting anything. No heat, no resistance, just an infinite descent into blackness. The strange details piled up. Dogs refused to go near the hole, growling and backing away. Birds avoided flying over it. People had dumped trash there for years, refrigerators, old tires, even animal carcasses, and yet nothing ever made a sound when it fell in. It didn't bounce, it didn't splash, it simply vanished. Local legends backed him up. Long before Mel bought the land, Native American stories had warned of a cursed place nearby, a place not to be entered not because of ghosts or monsters, but because it was not meant for people. They said it was a doorway to somewhere else, something older than the land itself. Scientists who heard the story quickly dismissed it. A vertical shaft that deep would collapse under its own weight. The Earth's crust would crush inwards. Even the Soviet Kola super-deep borehole, the deepest human-made hole in history, only reached 7.6 miles, and it had taken decades, specialized drills, and enormous funding. Yet Mel claimed he had gone twice as deep with nothing more than a pulley, fishing line, and curiosity. If it really was an impossibility, how could authorities have not simply dismissed it? This was the beginning of the darker part of the story. Not long after Mel's radio call, he claimed that agents clad in black began appearing on his property. Suddenly, access to the hole on his property was blocked for vague reasons, under the guise of a nearby plane crash. Mel claimed he was offered cash to leave the country with a warning that he'd better not speak of it again, and then he vanished. Years went by, and the story faded into obscure corners of conspiracy forums. Satellite images of the area in question would blur out for no reason. Amateur search teams came back dry with stories of their GPS units malfunctioning just outside the precincts of the rumored coordinates. Those who pushed too hard to investigate would receive strange phone calls, have their online accounts locked down, and in one case their research was wiped out overnight. It had evolved by the 2010s into something more than a strange landmark. It became a symbol. To some, proof of secret government projects. To others, an anomaly of nature awaiting explanation. But on one thing, they all agreed. Whatever truth was, it had been buried under layers of secrecy and silence. In the 2010s came a new kind of investigation with no time wasted. Not make-and-shift hikers with flashlights, nor conspiracy theorists with a shaky camcorder. It was a coordinated effort. Scientists, engineers, and former military techs, toting equipment capable of mapping underground structures in ways no human eye could. Their most powerful tool wasn't a drill or a camera. It was an AI scanning system designed to interpret the invisible. They were not going to look into Mel's Hole. They were going to see it, every inch, every anomaly, every shadow, in ways that no one ever had before. And what they found would rewrite everything we thought we knew about the legend and about what might be waiting in the dark. The AI scan that changed everything. The plan was simple on paper, but nothing about it was ordinary. In early 2024, a small, privately funded expedition assembled in secret. The team wasn't made up of TV ghost hunters or amateur thrill seekers. These were field engineers, former defense contractors, and underground mapping specialists, people who had spent their careers dealing with places most of us will never see. They brought with them equipment usually reserved for high-security infrastructure inspections, deep cave rescue planning, and military reconnaissance. But the heart of their operation wasn't human at all. At the center of the mission was a next-generation AI scanning system, a hybrid of photogrammetry, LiDAR, ground-penetrating radar, and electromagnetic sensors. This wasn't about taking a few blurry photos of a mysterious shaft. This was about creating a full 3D reconstruction of Mel's hole, right down to the millimeter, and letting the AI analyze it in real time for patterns human eyes might miss. Before lowering any equipment, the team set up a perimeter around the site. Every device had redundant power supplies and shielded data storage designed to survive electrical surges and interference. The rig they built at the edge of the opening looked like something between a deep-sea winch and a satellite launch platform. Attached to it was a cylindrical scanning drone, bristling with sensors, its exterior coated in matte black to reduce glare. The first seconds of the descent were uneventful. The drone's lights cut into the darkness, revealing walls that were far smoother than expected, almost polished as if something had cut through the earth with surgical precision. The AI immediately flagged this as anomalous. Natural shafts, even volcanic tubes, are irregular. This was symmetrical, consistent, intentional. As the drone went deeper, the AI began layering data. Photogrammetry mapped every curve of the walls, thermal sensors checked for heat sources, and electromagnetic readings scanned for disruptions in the surrounding field. At 200 feet, an AI noticed something strange, a complete absence of microfractures. In geology, all things will show stress lines, the scars of shifting Earth, but here the walls were flawless. The AI ran a material density check using the resonance data from the pings it emitted, and the results were shocking. The shaft did not match anything in the local basalt sandstone composition. It was denser, stronger. In places, it simply absorbed the signal. Then came the second anomaly. At around 340 feet, LiDAR feed revealed horizontal features stuck in the walls, thin, perfectly spaced ridges wrapping around the circumference like rings. Not random mineral deposits, not roots. The AI labeled them as structural reinforcement indicators, something you would expect inside a man-made tunnel, not in a vertical shaft custom-built in the middle of nowhere. As the descent continued, each foot revealed more questions than answers. At 500 feet, there was a spike in the values of the electromagnetic sensors for a brief moment, turning the compass on the drone completely nuts before it managed to stabilize again. The AI tagged it as localized EM distortion, probable active source. To put it in layman's terms, there was something down there radiating energy. Stopping for a while to allow the AI to process, the team found that its results were harder to explain. Out of all the overlapping scans, it produced a preliminary 3D model for the first 600 feet. What showed up was not a natural. Perfectly parallel walls, identical reinforcement rings every 50 feet, and at 2 points, narrow horizontal openings leading into what appeared to be side chambers, too symmetrical to be caves, too precise to be accidents. The deeper the scan went, the more it looked less like a hole and more like a shaft, a constructed passage, something designed to go down and keep going. The AI still hadn't delivered on its most unsettling findings. As it processed the composite data, it began overlaying a faint heat map from deep within one of the side chambers. This tiny, steady, and warm signature, not geological warmth, but the sort you'd expect from something operating, isn't leftover debris. It wasn't dead. They thought they were scanning a strange geological feature. What the AI showed them next would make some wonder if Mel's hole had ever been part of nature at all.
Geometry that shouldn't exist. When the AI's first full composite of the shaft loaded onto the team's main screen, it didn't look like any natural formation in Washington State or anywhere else on Earth. It was as if the ground had been bored through with machine precision, yet there were no signs of drilling, no tool marks, no debris piles that would have been left behind. The shaft's inner diameter measured exactly 14 feet across from the first scannable inch to the last point the drone reached, not an inch more, not an inch less. The AI flagged this as statistically impossible in a natural void of this depth. Geologists on the team tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but the data didn't budge. It wasn't just consistent, it was perfect. As the AI model rotated, the symmetry became even stranger. every 50 feet, without fail, the shaft was lined with thin ledges or rings protruding no more than 2 inches from the wall. They weren't rough like mineral deposits, they were smooth, uniform, and equidistant, like the steps of some inverted ladder built for something not quite human. The density scans deepened the mystery. Most of the shaft's material was denser than the surrounding bedrock, but certain segments, precisely aligned with these rings, reflected signals in a way that suggested composite alloys. Whatever these metals were, they weren't native to the area's geology. Cross-referencing the readings with known metals in the U.S. Geological Survey database returned no exact match. The AI labeled them simply unknown material, high structural integrity. And then there were the anomalies between the walls. At 280 feet, the LiDAR picked up what looked like a horizontal seam, a perfectly straight line cutting a 4-foot-wide section across the wall. The AI's spatial reconstruction showed that the seam bordered an empty space beyond the wall, a void about the size of a shipping container. During the team's thermal overlay, it was observed that the void was not cold, but rather gently and steadily warm, a couple of degrees higher than the surrounding rock. Some entity within was holding heat, though for how long it had been shut away inside remained to be seen. And even more puzzling was revealed 470 feet down, where the arch appeared to bulge from the wall in a half-circle curve. It wasn't a large one, maybe 3 feet wide, but whatever held it had the same metallic density as the reinforcement rings. Behind it, the AI detected another narrow channel branching away from the main shaft, sloping slightly downwards before fading from sensor range. By this time, the model of Mel's hole no longer resembled a vertical pit. Instead, it started looking like part of a system, an engineered complex created with intent and precision. The AI even constructed a structural stress prediction, which showed that the reinforcements could, in theory, withstand extremely high pressure, vibrations, and seismic activities. Whatever this was, it was not meant to collapse. After hours of taking a look at the model, one engineer on the team finally uttered what no one wished to say. "It hardly looks like something we are discovering, and more like something we are trespassing into." It was a thought that none could shake, for if the shaft had indeed been constructed, it had a purpose, and anything with a purpose has its creator. Yet still, the AI's work was far from over. As it concluded its next layer of scans, it began marking certain voids and wall sections with pulsing red indicators. The legend on the display read, "Potential access points." Access points to what, exactly? They were about to find out, because one of those flagged areas was more than just a void. It was a sealed chamber, and what the AI detected inside it would push this investigation into dangerous territory. The hidden chambers. The AI's pulsing red markers weren't random. They highlighted very specific zones along the shaft's walls where density, temperature, and geometry all shifted from the surrounding structure. To human eyes on the raw scan feed, these sections looked nothing more than slight changes in texture, but when the AI overlaid every dataset, LiDAR depth maps, thermal readings, and electromagnetic variants, a clearer picture emerged. Doors. The first was at 342 feet down. From the main shaft, it appeared as a shallow recess, just a few inches deep, framed by one of the metallic reinforcement rings. But the AI's cross-section showed that behind the surface was a hollow space nearly 20 feet long. The density map suggested the interior was partially filled with material that wasn't stone, metallic echoes, consistent with manufactured objects. The thermal readings from this chamber were unsettling. The surrounding rock sat at a predictable cool baseline, but inside, the AI detected 3 distinct warm zones, each steady, each separated by feet of empty air. The warmth was too controlled to be a natural heat pocket. Something in there was holding on to thermal energy as if it were powered. And even more puzzling was revealed 470 feet down, where the arch appeared to bulge from the wall in a half-circle curve. It wasn't a large one, maybe 3 feet wide, but whatever held it had the same metallic density as the reinforcement rings. Behind it, the AI detected another narrow channel branching away from the main shaft, sloping slightly downwards before fading from sensor range. By this time, the model of Mel's hole no longer resembled a vertical pit. Instead, it started looking like part of a system, an engineered complex created with intent and precision. The AI even constructed a structural stress prediction, which showed that the reinforcements could, in theory, withstand extremely high pressure, vibrations, and seismic activities. Whatever this was, it was not meant to collapse. After hours of taking a look at the model, one engineer on the team finally uttered what no one wished to say. "It hardly looks like something we are discovering, and more like something we are trespassing into." It was a thought that none could shake, for if the shaft had indeed been constructed, it had a purpose, and anything with a purpose has its creator. Yet still, the AI's work was far from over. As it concluded its next layer of scans, it began marking certain voids and wall sections with pulsing red indicators. The legend on the display read, "Potential access points." Access points to what, exactly? They were about to find out, because one of those flagged areas was more than just a void. It was a sealed chamber, and what the AI detected inside it would push this investigation into dangerous territory. The hidden chambers. The AI's pulsing red markers weren't random. They highlighted very specific zones along the shaft's walls where density, temperature, and geometry all shifted from the surrounding structure. To human eyes on the raw scan feed, these sections looked nothing more than slight changes in texture. But when the AI overlaid every dataset, LiDAR depth maps, thermal readings, and electromagnetic variants, a clearer picture emerged. Doors. The first was at 342 feet down. From the main shaft, it appeared as a shallow recess, just a few inches deep, framed by one of the metallic reinforcement rings. But the AI's cross-section showed that behind the surface was a hollow space nearly 20 feet long. The density map suggested the interior was partially filled with material that wasn't stone, metallic echoes, consistent with manufactured objects. The thermal readings from this chamber were unsettling. The surrounding rock sat at a predictable cool baseline, but inside, the AI detected 3 distinct warm zones, each steady, each separated by feet of empty air. The warmth was too controlled to be a natural heat pocket. Something in there was holding on to thermal energy, as if it were powered. And even more puzzling was revealed 470 feet down, where the arch appeared to bulge from the wall in a half-circle curve. It wasn't a large one, maybe 3 feet wide, but whatever held it had the same metallic density as the reinforcement rings. Behind it, the AI detected another narrow channel branching away from the main shaft, sloping slightly downwards before fading from sensor range. By this time, the model of Mel's hole no longer resembled a vertical pit. Instead, it started looking like part of a system, an engineered complex created with intent and precision. The AI even constructed a structural stress prediction, which showed that the reinforcements could, in theory, withstand extremely high pressure, vibrations, and seismic activities. Whatever this was, it was not meant to collapse. After hours of taking a look at the model, one engineer on the team finally uttered what no one wished to say. "It hardly looks like something we are discovering, and more like something we are trespassing into." It was a thought that none could shake, for if the shaft had indeed been constructed, it had a purpose, and anything with a purpose has its creator. Yet still, the AI's work was far from over. As it concluded its next layer of scans, it began marking certain voids and wall sections with pulsing red indicators. The legend on the display read, "Potential access points." Access points to what, exactly? They were about to find out, because one of those flagged areas was more than just a void. It was a sealed chamber, and what the AI detected inside it would push this investigation into dangerous territory. The hidden chambers. The AI's pulsing red markers weren't random. They highlighted very specific zones along the shaft's walls where density, temperature, and geometry all shifted from the surrounding structure. To human eyes on the raw scan feed, these sections looked nothing more than slight changes in texture, but when the AI overlaid every dataset, LiDAR depth maps, thermal readings, and electromagnetic variants, a clearer picture emerged. Doors. The first was at 342 feet down. From the main shaft, it appeared as a shallow recess, just a few inches deep, framed by one of the metallic reinforcement rings. But the AI's cross-section showed that behind the surface was a hollow space nearly 20 feet long. The density map suggested the interior was partially filled with material that wasn't stone, metallic echoes, consistent with manufactured objects. The temperature readings from this chamber were unsettling. The surrounding rock sat at a predictable cool baseline, but inside, the AI detected 3 distinct warm zones, each steady, each separated by feet of empty air. The warmth was too controlled to be a natural heat pocket. Something in there was holding on to thermal energy, as if it were powered. A second chamber sat even deeper, 511 feet below the surface. Unlike the first, this one didn't line up perfectly with the metallic rings. It seemed carved directly into the wall, and its entrance was sealed with a material that absorbed most of the scanning signal, a near-perfect shield. The AI still managed to extract faint outlines from inside, 4 cylindrical shapes arranged in a grid, each about 6 feet tall. When the system ran an electromagnetic analysis, the second chamber lit up like a beacon. The signal wasn't strong enough to interfere with the drone, but it pulsed at regular intervals, slow, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. It wasn't just giving off power, it was doing something with it. And then came the third chamber, smaller than the others, branching at an upward angle, as if it were meant to be accessed from above rather than below. There was no heat signature for this one, no EM activity. But the pass of LiDAR revealed something which made the team stop all at once. It was not empty inside. It contained just one shape, irregular, taller than a man, narrow, and with a silhouette that would not match any known machine or natural formation. The AI flagged it just as organic-like geometry. For quite a while, nobody said anything thereafter. The word organic meant something else entirely here. This went half a mile underground inside a shaft that was not supposed to exist, inside a chamber, sealed. No human had opened it, at least not recorded. However, it was debatable whether the team should lower a probe into the access point at risk. It was pure risk, because if the seals of the chambers turned out to be structural, rupturing them would totally destabilize the entire shaft, and if whatever was inside was touch-sensitive and such, you never know what would happen. The AI continued running predictive models in an attempt to determine the purpose of those spaces. One was that the spaces indeed were maintenance bays created by the chambers to house the equipment servicing the shaft itself, which they initially thought was implied by their spacing and reinforcement. Another proposed something far stranger, using heat and EM data, containment units. Of course, containment begs the question, containment for what? The argument finally ceased when the AI threw an urgent flag onto the control terminal. Motion detected. The movement was small, but indeed subtle, a shift of one of the warm zones by just a few inches. But in an environment that had remained utterly still for what could be centuries, even that was impossible to ignore. And as the team stared at the feed, realizing something deep in Mel's hole had just moved, they began to understand that this was no longer just a scan. They weren't alone down there. Movement in the void. At first, no one moved. The red indicator on the AI's display blinked once, then steadied. Motion detected. Inside a sealed chamber, hundreds of feet below ground, in an environment where no life should survive. The drone's thermal camera replayed the moment, one of the 3 warm zones in Chamber 1 shifting slightly to the left, only a few inches, a blink of movement in the scan, but it was enough to throw the AI into high alert mode. The system ran verification routines to rule out signal noise, sensor drift, or software errors. Each check came back clean. Whatever that was, it moved. The LiDAR sweep immediately followed, sending out precise pulses into the recess. The return signal was wrong. Instead of a fixed surface echo, there was a flicker, the kind of distortion you get when scanning something that isn't still. The shape seemed to flex just slightly, as though adjusting its position. The thermal map showed something even stranger. The heat signature didn't fade when it moved. It bloomed, brightening by a fraction of a degree.
In biological terms, that could mean increased activity, like a pulse quickening. A hush settled over the control tent. The lead engineer muttered that it had to be a malfunction, but his voice was tight, unconvincing. The AI had already labeled the anomaly as low-frequency kinetic activity, and worse, it had time-stamped similar micro-movements in 2 earlier scans, moments the human operators had missed entirely. Then came the EM spike. For the first time since the descent began, the drone's compass spun violently, its orientation feed glitching before recovering. The AI overlaid the data. The EM burst coincided exactly with the anomaly's last recorded movement. Could be mechanical, one of the team whispered, though no one sounded convinced. If it was mechanical, it had been active for how long? Decades? Centuries? And why was it sealed away? The squad was discussing whether to pull the drone up right away. However, it was at that point that the AI's predictive module engaged, suggesting that the area be scanned at close range with high resolution. And this was no whim. This system categorized the anomaly as being a priority subject based on the interplay of motion, heat, and EM activity. They agreed to bring the drone down another 8 feet to the level of the access seam to Chamber 1. Then the drone's floodlights struck the wall, revealing nothing but that same smooth, unbroken surface. But the sensors screamed with activity. The LiDAR feed appeared to stutter for a moment before going back to normal, and for the next 2 frames, the AI captured an outline inside the chamber. Tall, narrow. The proportions of it did not fit human anatomy, though it was not an organization that would fit in the category of something amorphous. The AI classification failed to assign it into any known category in either the geological or biological arenas, just unresolved object type. Everyone stared in silence at the model. The next sweep wiped it clean, leaving static for the next few seconds. Then the video feed from the drone degraded badly, tearing horizontally in bands, then freezing altogether. The AI tried to reconnect. It has 37 seconds of doing nothing. Then, in the frozen video frame, the light inside the chamber shifted, not because the drone moved, but because something inside had reflected it back. It was 2 pinpoints of brightness, exactly where a pair of eyes might be. The feed went black. In the minutes that followed, the team yanked the drone above the surface. The winch screamed as it cranked. The tether came up intact, no brakes, no fraying, but the drone itself was dead. All onboard storage was wiped, every bit of preserved data saved only because the AI streamed its analysis in real time to an off-site server. This site was there to witness something that was uninvited. Now, however, it knows that they have found something, somewhere, buried deep within Mel's hole. The decision to continue scanning would come at a cost, because within hours, the team would realize their data wasn't safe, and neither were they. The vanishing data. The team didn't celebrate pulling the drone back to the surface. No one clapped, no one even spoke above a whisper. The device sat on the work table, its matte black casing intact but cold to the touch, colder than the surrounding air. Inside, its solid-state memory was a blank slate. The data they had just recorded, the raw footage of the moving anomaly, was gone. At first, they assumed it was a hardware fault caused by the electromagnetic spike from the chamber, but the AI's off-site server still had partial telemetry, enough to confirm the onboard data hadn't been corrupted accidentally. It had been erased. The logs showed a deliberate overwrite command sent milliseconds before the feed cut out. The problem, no one on the team had issued that command. The AI flagged the incident as remote intrusion possible. That meant someone or something had connected to their drone's control system mid-descent. Even with the team's secure hardwired tether, the intrusion was undeniable. By the time they began reviewing what fragments had survived on the offsite backup, more problems surfaced. One by one, workstations began to crash. First was the mapping engineer's laptop, a sudden blue screen followed by a complete boot failure. Then the thermal imaging terminal froze, its fan roaring until the power supply burned out. In less than an hour, 3 machines were dead. At first, they thought it might be a localized surge or environmental interference, but then a far more disturbing pattern emerged. The machines weren't just failing at random, they were dying the moment someone tried to open files containing the chamber anomaly scans. It didn't stop there. An encrypted message popped up on the team leader's satellite phone, a device that wasn't even connected to their field network. The text was short, and it chilled the camp. Cease operations. Do not transmit. Leave site. There was no sender ID, no signal origin. The phone's log showed no record of an incoming call or message. 2 hours later, headlights were shining on the dirt track that leads to their perimeter. 3 vehicles, all black, no plates. They stopped far enough so they could be seen, engines now idling in the fog. No one got out. No lights came on inside the cabins. The team stared from far away, waiting for something. Finally, the vehicles backed up into the tree line and disappeared. That night, an AI gave another alert. The faraway server, hundreds of miles away, detected multiple intrusion attempts. Whoever did this seemed not to want to delete the remaining data yet, as they were copying it. Logs showed bursts of outbound traffic, those rapidly directed to encrypted IP addresses. By the morning, the team had completely lost server access. Hosting that server assigned confirmation for the closure of the account, but without any explanation. No paperwork was given. It was a government directive closure. The last of their secure backups was gone. The only remaining copies of the scan existed on portable drives that the team had physically disconnected in time. Those drives now remained sealed in separate cases, each sealed in anti-static shielding and stored under armed watch. It was now evident that it was not just environmental danger. This was active suppression. Someone or something wanted every trace of the anomaly buried, just like the hole in which it was buried. It was no longer what they had discovered, but why. Why was it being erased from existence before anybody could see it? And the AI, before its own systems went offline, left them with one last file, a reconstructed image showing the shaft extending far deeper than anyone thought possible, connecting to patterns that matched 2 other locations on the planet. The last file the AI sent before going silent was unlike anything the team had seen. It wasn't just a scan of Mel's hole, it was a map. The rendering showed the shaft plunging far beyond their sensor range, its depth extending for miles. But the real shock were 2 faint, impossible lines overlaying the map, connecting the shaft to points far from Washington. Global coordinate tracing placed the endpoints in a Nevada desert and an uninhabited region halfway across the world. At first, they assumed a software error, but cross-referencing seismic and satellite anomalies confirmed the site's shared troubling traits: electromagnetic interference, vanishing wildlife, and old legends about bottomless pits or cursed ground. The Nevada location was especially disturbing. Geological data matched Mel's hole almost exactly, same diameter, identical reinforcement patterns, and a void-like density, as if the structure had been replicated. The overseas site appeared barren in visible imagery, but decades of thermal data revealed brief, intermittent heat blooms beneath the surface, mirroring anomalies found in Mel's sealed chambers. The AI's conclusion was blunt: probable linked structures. If correct, Mel's hole was one node in a global network. But for what? Communication? Transport? Containment? No one knew. Another detail stood out. The reinforcement rings of the shaft had ended some 1.9 miles down. The structure narrowed slightly at this point. The walls, of some unknown material, were absorbing both thermal and electromagnetic scans almost completely. The AI could not see beyond it, but it could feel something. There was a faint, ultra-low frequency vibration from below that depth. Hours went into isolating it from the background, but the rhythm was precise. 2 short pulses, 1 long, pause,
repeat. Perhaps a code, a warning, or signaling something else.
It was an idea even more stupendous. Should all of them find a connection in some kind of active force existing deep inside of them? Mel's hole became not a lonely anomaly, but a part of a worldwide system. Cold silence engulfed the camp. If the entity of Chamber 1 had reacted to the drone some time ago, then it followed that the signal was possibly not random. Possibly it was responding. In all cases, this made the hole a lot more than a riddle. It was an open channel, and whatever lies down the line could not be expected to keep quiet for much longer. The data we have uncovered is just the beginning, and the silence from official channels is deafening. If Mel's hole is truly just one node in a global machine, what happens when the rest of it wakes up? We are peeling back layers that were meant to stay hidden forever. If you want to be part of the few who know the truth, don't just watch, join us. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell because our next investigation might just reveal what's waiting at the other end of that signal. This report is an original production, all rights reserved to the creator, and unauthorized reproduction is prohibited. Click the video on your screen now. What we found next changes everything.